Welcome to From Our Generation, where we uncover the ideas and events that shape the world we live in today. I'm Crom Carmichael.
And I'm Mike Hassel.
Together we'll explore the past to better understand the present, because history isn't just about what happened, it's about how you think about it. Well, Mike, it's September 12th, 2025. It's been an eventful period of time. I think it's been 2 weeks since we've been on the air, and Charlie Kirk was assassinated
2 days ago.
2 days ago, and I think you did a little bit of work looking up kind of the basis, because I've heard the word that he was killed, I've heard the word that he's murdered. I think the most accurate description of what happened, and I think it's important to create this distinction, is I believe that the right word to use is that he was assassinated.
And a lot of the headlines have been using that word seemingly in a very intentional way.
Yeah.
And so we looked it up, and what it means is to murder an important person in a surprise attack that is done for political or religious reasons. A couple of other words associated with it are premeditation, that implies surprise, but treachery also is another dimension of this.
Okay.
I had heard long ago that this had something to do with the ancient Persians. So I looked further, and I have found this also, that there was a group in ancient Persia called the Hashashim. That means they use hashish. Maybe it's hashishim. It's a word like that. And it became anglicized into assassin in English.
Interesting.
And so they were known for killing enemies of their state.
Or of their religious preference.
Yes, something having to do with their political and religious organization. That was their tactic for dealing with the enemies.
Okay. And so I think in the case of Charlie Kirk, that's the right term to use.
Yes.
And then the question becomes, he was 31 years old when he was assassinated. He didn't go to high school. He went to high school, did not go to college.
Yes.
And he made the decision, it was a purposeful decision to not go to college. And it's interesting because I've watched some of his clips of when he is interacting with students, and those interactions are I'm sure that many of them that I have not seen are as interesting or more interesting than the ones I have seen. But one of the things that he tells students is, he says, figure out what you're passionate about and make sure that is included in your career. He said you can enjoy work if you're passionate about what you do. And so that's what he encouraged me. There was one person, and I saw this clip, the guy said, well, I don't know that I'm good at anything except I like to talk. And he says, oh, well, then you're in the top 1%. He said, because that means that you have communication skills.
Yeah, well, liking to talk and having communication skills may be a little different, but I take your point.
Yeah, but I mean, he said you should go into the field of communications, because if you enjoy talking, if you enjoy expressing yourself, you can hone that skill. But I just thought it was.
Yeah, it reminds me, when I was a kid, I heard someone say, if you do what you're passionate about, you never work a day in your life.
Right.
And I think that's along the same
lines.
And
that's what he was trying to convey to students, because the thing that Charlie Kirk did was he's like a few other people in my lifetime who built something from nothing. Rush Limbaugh built something from nothing. I mean, if you're a talking head or an anchor on a news network, you didn't build that network. You were hired to fill a position and a role. So you didn't build something from nothing.
Right.
You might be important, but you're not like Rush Limbaugh was. You're not like Charlie Kirk was. You're not like Martin Luther King was. You could even put Malcolm X in that category, in the sense that Malcolm X was assassinated in 1965. I don't think they've ever decided who did it, but I think an awful lot of roads lead to the Nation of Islam felt threatened by Malcolm X because he was moving away from the Nation of Islam, and he was a very influential person, and so he was assassinated.
We could have a whole show sometime about the who should get credit for building things. You know, because Obama said you didn't build that.
Right.
Right. It took a village to do it. And there's a great quote that we all stand on the shoulders of giants. We build on what has come before. So in some degree, everybody inherits some assets and tools to do things with. But there are very different degrees of initiative that change things in the way that Charlie Kirk did.
Yes.
Rush Limbaugh had a radio network that he started, but he was in the middle of nowhere with no influence, and he built it from that, using a network somebody else had built.
Well, he didn't build a network that somebody else had built. He built radio.
That's what I mean. He used a network somebody else had built, and then he built his show.
Well, all
and he deserves credit for that.
The only thing I'm arguing about is that there was no network.
For Charlie Kirk, yeah.
No, there was no network for Rush Limbaugh either. There were a whole bunch of radio stations who then signed up to participate in his network.
Okay.
That's why I'm saying there's a distinction here between CBS News, that if you are hired to be the anchor person on CBS News, all of those stations have already subscribed to and are playing the CBS Evening News. Yeah. Rush Limbaugh had to persuade, or his people had to persuade, each radio station who became part of his network.
Right.
So he had to do that, and that's I'm saying that is a significantly different accomplishment, and than being an important person on an established news network that already
it's been around for a century.
Yes, and in the case of Charlie Kirk, he first started. He had 20 people who'd show up at an event, and it was mostly just Charlie Kirk. He might have had one employee.
Let's clarify what he was doing then. I think it was
either
2010 or 10 years ago. Which was it? It's only 10 or 15 years ago.
13.
Okay.
Because he started when he was 18
he was
and
31.
He was assassinated when he was 31.
Yeah, so that'd be about 2012.
2012.
My understanding is that part of the reason he didn't go to college is he felt like there was a lot of miseducation going on.
Mm-hmm.
He was observant enough to know that there's a lot of errant teaching. And so he was, I think, asking students to call out professors who were giving them a load of BS.
Right. Yes.
Is that right?
Yeah, he started as that, but he then started talking about the free market, talking about limited government, and most of what he talked about in the first few years. And I don't know exactly when the change that I'm about to articulate came in, but what he was talking about was more economics than it was moral. And then someplace along the way, a few years ago, he started talking about how our country was formed and what the foundations of our country are, and the foundations of in a happy and meaningful life. How important religion plays in the scheme of things. How important family is. How important having children is. And so he moved not completely away from, but he started including many other topics in his in what he talked about, and then started people asking him questions that were not economic, that were not necessarily economic in nature. He still took those,
yes,
but he talked a lot about the nation of Israel. It was very interesting. I watched one where he was talking about Judaism, and he said Judaism is a word that means so many different things because there's so many aspects to that one word. He said Judaism is being Jewish is something that you can be born as Jewish. You can, if you're not born Jewish, you can become Jewish religiously. And so what he said there are people who are born Jewish. There are many Jewish people who are atheists, so they don't ascribe to Judaism.
Right. It's a religion. It's a culture. There's a language associated with it. It's an ethnicity.
Yeah.
It's a genetic component, that I guess is close to ethnicity.
Can be.
But it's matrilineal. It comes through the mother. You're Jewish if your mother is Jewish.
Okay. That's interesting.
So,
okay.
There's a lot of aspects to it, but the point is, to us in the West who think of religion as a chosen way of thinking, a way of believing, it's more inherited in the Jewish faith and some forms of Christian faith, but it's more passed down.
Yeah. Well, and
culturally
in the discussions, he says so people who are Jewish can have a completely different worldview, because you can be a religious Jew,
sure,
or you can be an atheist
Jew, right?
Jew,
and still be a Jew.
Yeah, and so so at any rate, I thought that was interesting, but as he in the last few years, as his audiences grew in size and as the discussion topics that he would take on expanded, this question of how our nation was founded, how America is unique in the world, how it is exceptional in the world, and not just, he doesn't mean necessarily better than, although he can argue that. He means different from. And so he talks a lot about the Declaration of Independence. He talks a lot about the people whose ideas in John Locke. He talks about Socrates. He talks about Rousseau, and Rousseau would obviously be the opposite. His worldview would be the opposite of John Locke. But so he takes the classics, and with the giants of political thought, we cover a lot of that. But
exactly, it's pretty remarkable for somebody with a high school education,
and that's the point.
To be imparting that to college students that are not getting it well imparted from their
which means
teachers.
You have to study it.
Yes,
you're not told. You're not taught. You study.
Yeah, and
you can become highly educated on your own, and that was another point that he made regularly. But when you get down to why was he assassinated? Because your definition is right, is correct,
spot on for what happened.
Yes, and the reason there are two reasons to me that he was assassinated. I'm sure there are others, but there are two that are very compelling. One is he was incredibly persuasive, because if you're not persuasive, your political enemies don't care. But if you are persuasive, then they care. And
he was changing minds and changing votes.
Yes, he was doing both. And then the other thing is that he was a threat to the left, who believed that government is the source of all rights. And he absolutely attacked that idea. And what I want to do is I want to play.
Yeah, we've talked about this before. Let's just step back and remind anyone who may have heard the prior podcast that we've emphasized several times that the big change in the world when the U.S. was created is that the people now became in charge and they hired the government. They weren't subjects of a king or some other authority that inherited from generations, an infinite number of generations. It now is the idea that people are sovereign, they hire the government, and their rights are theirs by nature or by their creator.
By their creator.
Yes.
And so I want to play a quote of Tim Kaine, and there was somebody he was being confirmed for a position, and whoever the person was.
Well, Tim Kaine is a senator talking to someone else who's trying to be confirmed.
Yes.
Yes, and this is recent.
This is very recent. It's like a few days ago.
Yeah, and it's astoundingly ignorant.
And the person that he was challenging had just finished talking about where rights come from, and was talking about the Declaration of Independence. And so Tim Kaine's response was, let's play his response.
That rights don't come from laws and don't come from the government, but come from the creator. That's what the Iranian government believes. It's a theocratic regime that bases its rule on Shia law and targets Sunnis, Baha'is, Jews, Christians, and other religious minorities. And they do it because they believe that they understand what natural rights are from their creator. So the statement that our rights do not come from our laws or our governments is extremely troubling.
Right now, what I want to do is this. I want to read from the Declaration of Independence that Tim Kaine apparently doesn't know exists. So I'm going to just read this. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, that to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed, that whenever any form of government becomes destructive of these ends, it is the right of the people to alter or to abolish it, and to institute new government, laying its foundation on such principles and organizing its powers in such form as they shall seem most likely to affect their safety and happiness. So essentially what the Declaration of Independence is saying is that God gives rights, and the purpose of this was...
Let's finish the sentence. God gives rights what?
God gives rights to individuals that no government can justly take away.
Now, my shorthand for that is the government works for the people.
Yes. Well, The government works for the people because it's ordained by God, and that's the key point here.
Well,
that's the key point, because if it's not that, the Declaration of Independence asserts that it is that we are endowed by our Creator. That's not anything other than God in the sense of the Declaration of Independence.
Yeah, where I would take exception is that the people choose to establish their government. That's not ordained by God. That's the people's choice. The people are ordained by God, according to that language,
Right.
with their rights.
Yes.
And then they can choose to protect them by creating a government to do so.
Yes.
That's what I understand that to
Well,
have
and
said.
to secure these rights. In other
Yeah,
words,
that's right.
but no institutions created by man, according to the Declaration of Independence, no institutions created by man can usurp God-given rights
That's right.
justly.
Yeah.
Justly.
Yeah.
All right,
They can issue legal rights, but natural rights and moral rights belong to people. They are not a privilege given to them by some government or any other institution.
which Tim Kaine believes that
said.
all rights come from government.
and can be withdrawn by government is the implication.
Exactly. And this is what Charlie Kirk, so circling back, when Charlie Kirk would talk on college campuses, he talked a great deal about what you and I are talking about right now.
We're talking a religious language about endowed by God. This was a common way of expressing and thinking in the 1700s. I believe that whether you believe it's from God or whether you think it's just in the nature of things and don't choose to use God language to say that, even if you don't believe in God, it's in the nature of things that you have certain inherent rights. You own your labor, you own your conscience, and those things should not be compelled.
Well, if those rights, this is where you and I have had this discussion a number of times, that if those rights do not come from a source that is greater than mankind, then they're privileges. They're not rights.
Yeah, well, I would say nature is greater than mankind. This is the natural order.
Okay.
That people have these, they own these things, and it is immoral for them to be usurped.
Okay.
And someone else say, you got that because I'm so kind, and I'm going to take it away if I don't like the way you're handling it.
Okay. Well, then I think we're in the same place in the Declaration of Independence.
Right.
Says that governments are not at the top of the pyramid.
That's right. They're not sovereign.
They're not sovereign. And they serve the people.
Yes.
And they serve the people because that should be the natural order of things, which, by the way, this is what made America exceptional, in that we were the first country in the history of the world that was founded on the principle that government serves the people, not the other way around.
Right. And so the people are sovereign.
The people are sovereign.
Yes.
And according to Tim Kaine, a senator, and also was Hillary Clinton's running mate, that the source of all rights to any individual is the government.
Yeah.
And that is what Charlie Kirk said. That is false. This is on the Liberty Bell. Proclaim liberty throughout all of the land unto all inhabitants thereof. That's on the Liberty Bell.
Right. And it's a direct quote from Leviticus, I understand.
Yes, it's Leviticus.
I'm not a biblical
25.
scholar.
Yeah, and that is from the book of Moses. It's the third book of the Torah and of the Old Testament, and it's also known as the third book of Moses. And so
I think that means it was his instructions to the Jewish people, because he said, I'm not going with you. And
well, he couldn't.
Yeah, that's the story that
God said
we
you can't
get.
go.
Yeah.
And so what we're saying here, though, is that on the Liberty Bell itself, which was right at the time of the Declaration of Independence,
Right.
we have a religious quote on there. And so to listen to and this is why Charlie Kirk was such a threat to people who think like Tim Kaine. Is that Charlie Kirk says, you don't have that kind of power over me. I don't care if you're a U.S. senator. Right. We are equal in the eyes of our Creator. Right. And don't you think that you can tell me what to do in certain areas of my life?
As a matter of fact, you work for me, or actually you work for the people of Virginia. I've got somebody else who works for me.
Yeah.
But yeah, these things are a real big threat to big advocates of big government.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
That just say that simply. And so you can see, I don't know whether Kaine really believes that, or he's so completely ignorant that he believes that, or it may be a belief of convenience that he doesn't want to accept it.
And from my perspective, those are distinctions that don't matter.
Yeah.
Because he said it.
Right. Fair
And
enough.
so you have to believe that he believes what he said, especially when he's attacking somebody who said the opposite.
Right.
Okay. Now I want to play. Then what happened was after Charlie Kirk's assassination, the networks then started trying to explain it, and so MSNBC had one of their analysts on, one of their commentators, a guy named Matthew Dowd, who has been he's been a person he's been on panels.
A pundit.
He's a pundit, but he's been on panels where people have referred to Trump as Hitler, people have referred to the MAGA crowd as Nazis, and he just sits there and doesn't say anything. And let me just say this: if you're on a panel and somebody says that a person that you disagree with is Hitler, and you don't say anything, you're kind of guilty by the association of being there, because you could have said, "I think that's despicable."
Going too far.
Yeah, I think, and he didn't do things like that. So he was asked to explain what happened, and so this is the clip of Matthew Dowd.
I'm going to bring you in on this. Talk to me about the environment. The reports of exactly what happened are not confirmed yet, but talk to me about the environment in which a shooting like this happens.
Yeah, and again, emphasize what you just emphasized. We don't know any full details of this. We don't know if this was a supporter shooting their gun off in celebration, or so we have no idea about this. But following up on what was just said, he's been one of the most divisive, especially divisive younger figures in this, who is constantly sort of pushing this sort of hate speech or sort of aimed at certain groups. And I always go back to hateful thoughts lead to hateful words, which then lead to hateful actions.
So Matthew Dowd did two things there. One is he said, well, this could have been one of his supporters who just shoot, as if every time Charlie Kirk speaks on a college campus, people are out there shooting their guns in the air. That is one of the most stupid. That is such a stupid statement. And but it's not. I'm not surprised that particular person would say something that stupid. Now, but then what he says is that things that Charlie Kirk said were hateful. Well, that's because Matthew Dowd doesn't agree with them. And this is what the left does. If you say something that they don't agree with, that is by definition hateful. It's not merely a difference of opinion. It's hateful.
Right.
And so, what Charlie Kirk said, you have to go back to, what did Charlie Kirk talk about? What did Turning Point do on college campuses? And it talked about the importance of our religious faith in the founding of our country. It talks about the importance of family. It talks about the importance of having children. It talks about the importance of liberty, individual rights. In other words, he was the most well-known and most effective proponent of limited government in the name of very moral principles. And this is what the great threat was.
My understanding is he never did this in an angry way.
No.
I've never seen more than a few seconds of him until the last few days. So I just don't really know a lot about it. But what I think I've read since this happened is that his tent said, "Prove me wrong." So he would take all comers.
That was the title. That was what written on his tent.
Yes. And so for anybody that wanted to challenge him and have a respectful debate, he would take them.
Yes.
And he apparently never responded with contempt and harshness and anger. He would try to debate the issue, right?
Right. And he would think
that's not hateful. Even if you despise what he believes, that's not hateful behavior.
No, but this is the key thing. To the left, hate speech is anything that diminishes the power of government. Now think about that for a second, and how important it is to understand that the national debate right now is: do you want government to run your life, or do you want to run your life? Fundamentally, that's the dividing line.
Yes.
And Matthew Dowd believes that government should run everybody's life, and anybody who says otherwise is kind of asking to be shot. That's more or less because when you
They're
listen,
the threat to my existence.
when you listen to him, he explains why he was shot. It wasn't that it was a despicable act. It was, and that's why Rush Limbaugh, as he got more and more influential, his security level just had to keep increasing and increasing because he was a threat. So at any rate, but I wanted to, with Charlie Kirk, I just wanted to read a couple of things because there's a wonderful article written about Charlie Kirk in Town Hall. But I want to just read a couple of things at the very end. And this was by John Teagan, who was a Marine. And these are some of the things that he said that they would talk to Charlie Kirk about. When a nation stays silent while one group acts violently without consequences, that nation begins to rot. Justice breaks down. Truth becomes dangerous. The violent become bolder. The people slowly lose themselves, adjusting to the darkness instead of standing against it. That is what happens when evil goes unchecked. It doesn't stop. It escalates. And if the righteous don't speak, fight, and push back, they become complicit. What happened to Charlie Kirk wasn't just a tragedy, it was a warning. You don't defeat evil by being quiet. You defeat it by standing up when it counts. I won't sit down, and I know I'm not alone.
This reminds me of an decades older quote, and I don't know who it's from, but they said basically they came for X and I said nothing. And then they came for Y and I said nothing. Then they came for Z and I said nothing. Then they came for me and there was nobody left to defend me. Yeah. So it is sort of this idea that, when good people do nothing, evil prevails.
Yeah. And so I want to chat a little bit about Charlie Kirk and his possible legacy. And it isn't just what he has said and what's on tape, because I want to talk about previous people who were making a difference and whose legacy in some cases did live on. In other cases, their legacy didn't live on as much.
Right.
The first one is Malcolm X, and I mentioned him earlier. He was assassinated in 1965, and he was an eloquent speaker. And he was changing his worldview. He was in the process of changing his worldview. And because he was a nation of Islam, he might have been head of the Nation of Islam at the time.
There were groups in there, and he wasn't head of it all, but he was a leader among some parts of it.
And he was beginning to have his doubts.
Differences.
And, difference is a better word. Mm-hmm. And he was assassinated. But
by somebody within the Nation of Islam.
Within the Nation of Islam.
Not by their ideological adversaries on the other end of the spectrum.
Yes, and it was because he was persuasive and because he was now a threat to them.
Well, he was a renegade, and maybe you would see it as a treacherous or traitorous kind of.
Yeah, but the key thing is that he was persuasive. That's why being a renegade who nobody listens to, you're not a threat.
Right.
But Malcolm X was almost a person alone. And so when he was assassinated, his influence died with him because there wasn't an organization. When Martin Luther King was assassinated in 1968, he did have an organization, but it was a smallish organization compared to Turning Point. And what it would do was it promoted what Martin Luther King believed. And then when he would give speeches, large crowds would come to hear him speak. But then when he left and moved someplace else, there was no infrastructure that stayed in place after he left. Turning Point, on the other hand, has chapters on 3,500 colleges and high school campuses where there are active people promoting the ideas of Turning Point, and they're the ideas that you and I are talking about here.
Who knows what talents are buried in that mound of people. We may have 36 Charlie Kirks emerging because now they have an opportunity.
Yeah. They have 300 full-time employees, and they have a very, very good board of directors, very effective board of directors. And so for Turning Point, for it to become bigger still, and it was becoming more and more and more influential. In fact, I will I will make the statement that I can't prove, but I can provide plenty of evidence, but I can't prove it, is that Charlie Kirk, more than any other single person, is the reason that Trump won re-election, and certainly won re-election by winning all of the battleground states and winning the majority of the vote, because Gen Z, which is where Charlie Kirk focused his energy, Gen Z switched their vote dramatically. Biden got 25%. He won the Gen Z vote by 25%.
He won 25% of the Gen Z vote.
No.
He won it by a margin of 25?
By a margin in 2020.
In 20? Okay.
In 2020, he won it by a margin of 25. Kamala Harris won it by a margin of 4. Okay. So there was a 21% swing. That is a huge swing. It's millions of votes in Gen Z, because Gen Z is 18 to 29.
Right.
That's a big group. And there's no other person that you can point to that could explain the swing in that vote. And so, and I also saw in the news last night that Charlie Kirk, who was very good friends with J.D. Vance, was one of the people who was encouraging candidate Trump to pick J.D. Vance as his running mate. Mm. And so I think Charlie Kirk was enormously influential, and I think he was influential from the standpoint that particularly threatens the left, and that is this God Christian centered or God centered Judeo-Christian ethic of how our government was formed and how our government should function, and where these rights are. And what I'm saying is that over the years that he was tilling the fields, he switched from being more transactional in the sense of talking about only the economic benefits of liberty to more the moral component. And I think that was the biggest threat. And you see people, and by the way, Matthew Dowd, just to finish the story, MSNBC fired Matthew Dowd.
Within about a day.
Yeah. Well, yeah, certainly within. In fact, I think it was that night.
That night, yeah.
Yeah. And so you get into, and then MTSU. There was a professor at MTSU.
Middle Tennessee State University.
Tennessee State, right? Right here in our area. There was a professor there, or maybe even a dean. I don't remember. It was one of the two, who had some very disparaging remarks, almost about Charlie Kirk's assassination, and MTSU fired that person. Now Michigan, on the other hand, Michigan had a
this University of Michigan.
University of Michigan, yeah, University of Michigan. Charles H.F. Davis III, who teaches at the University of Michigan Center for the Study of Higher and Post-Secondary Education, called Kirk's killing a solution to what he asserted are violent conditions and violent rhetoric spewed by empowered people that create them. And the University of Michigan's response to that was, a spokesperson for the University of Michigan said, the school does not take a position on Davis's comments. It says, quote, in accordance with the university's institutional neutrality policy, the university does not take positions on matters not directly connected to university governance. Faculty members are free to speak and debate issues of the day. But to be clear, those individuals' expressions do not represent the views of the university. Let me say this. That is BS. That is absolute BS. And I know it's BS because if some professor at the University of Michigan on their own started disparaging marginalized members of the community using disparaging language like this, they would fire them in a heartbeat.
If they said something about disabled people?
Disabled people, if they said something disparaging about black people, if they said something disparaging about trans people,
yeah.
I mean, it's truly out on a platform, they would be fired. And that would have nothing to do with university governance.
Right.
And so what you have here is the university doesn't think that saying terrible things about a person who's just been assassinated is something where the university doesn't care if its employees speak like that. And by the way, this gets into another interesting question, and that is freedom of speech.
I was just going to say, this
Please.
is a really hard problem,
Mm-hmm.
and that freedom of speech means you can say what you want without censure, And if
No, without being arrested. without being arrested.
Well, the Bill of Rights says Congress shall make no law.
Right.
Okay, it doesn't bind other people. If you employ me and I say something you don't like, you can fire me.
Correct.
I don't have the right to say anything I want.
Correct.
Under your employ.
Correct. And so the University of Michigan
Has chosen
to say this person, it's okay for this person to say this.
Yeah. So you get people on both sides that want to shut down language they don't like from the other side. Right. It's the same thing at Columbia, where this guy was Palestinian and saying a lot of pro-Palestinian things, saying pretty hateful and also, what's the word I'm trying to think of? Agitating and creating violent reactions. Right.
Yeah.
And there's this old idea that you can't yell fire in a crowded theater. You can't agitate and cause violence. It's a legal standard for what you can say. It may not apply directly, but still there are exceptions to free speech. And what are they? And this is a really hard problem that universities are wrestling with. All of us have to wrestle with.
Well, I guess what I'm saying, Mike, is that yes, it's a difficult issue, but their explanation of is that we have a policy that unless it affects university governance,
right,
they have a right to say whatever they want to. And I can promise you that I can come up with
that
they don't apply that evenly.
I get that point, but the principle is not necessarily bad. Think of the social media companies. Are they supposed to police speech, and it's okay to say certain things about Palestinian rights, but not okay to say certain things about transgender?
They do that.
Well,
they do that. They don't allow hate speech.
Yeah, and this is a problem because they're set up in the law to be an open forum where they're not in a position to tell you what you can say and edit what you say. They shouldn't be in a position to do that.
Yeah, okay.
But then people say nasty things and violent things, and they're accused of not controlling it.
Well, they do try to control that. And
some things they do, some things they don't.
I'm saying they're better at some than others, but they're private entities. And what I'm suggesting is the freedom of speech issue is a matter of what you are free to say without being arrested by the government. If you're an employee of a company and they believe what you have said hurts their brand,
right?
They have the right to fire you.
Yes.
People say, well, people have a right to protest. I don't know if you remember. I'm sure you do. It wasn't that many months ago where a group of Google employees went in and sat into the CEO's.
Had a sit-in.
They did sit-in, and they all got fired.
Yeah. Similarly at Microsoft, they hijacked their internal stuff to advocate for political change.
Right.
Fired them.
And they all got fired. Now, they didn't get arrested
right.
by the government. They got fired from their job, and that's what I'm saying. That's the distinction. Here's from Columbia. You brought them up. The Columbia University encampment organizer, Kamame James, who fantasized about murdering Zionists. I mean, that was part of what he said. Shortly after news broke that Kirk, the conservative activist and founder of Turning Point, was shot while giving a speech at Utah Valley University, James posted on X, more, down with all fascists. Now, should Columbia be held accountable for the language of somebody that they allowed to stay on that campus for that? And if they should, should other people on that campus be able to call for the same thing for people on the political left? And I think that is a cycle to the bottom.
Right.
I mean, I'm not saying therefore people who think that leftists ought to be murdered or assassinated have a right to say so. I don't think they do.
No.
And I think that also even would fall under if you threaten the president of the United States. I think if you threaten a U.S. senator online, I'm going to kill Senator so and so. I think if you do that, I think that you can be arrested for that. I think so. And so this gets into this whole area of Charlie Kirk. But let me go back to the legacy and I want to get your thoughts on this because we touched on it briefly. And that is that Turning Point has an organizational structure with a person at the top who was the driving force. He was the entrepreneur who founded it. He was the driving force. I've attended 2 Turning Point events that are fundraising in nature, and Charlie Kirk was always the speaker. There were many other people from Turning Point there, but none of the others spoke.
He was the Mary Kay he was the personification, of course. He was the founder, but he represented in his person everything that organization stood for, and was the easiest thing to relate to.
Right. Now, there are 300 employees, and they were dedicated to the 3,500 chapters and growing. And so
all within the U.S., correct?
All in the U.S. These are all on college campuses and high school campuses, a total of 3,500 and 300 employees. And so what do you think will happen with Turning Point in the absence of Charlie Kirk, without his leadership?
So I don't have a crystal ball, and I'm not sure I even have great analytical power to say. But I did hear an interesting thing that I'd like to riff on. Someone said there are going to be statues erected to Charlie Kirk because he's now a martyr who represents civil debate and free speech. And it's something that we're losing in our country if this tete-a-tete, this back and forth and race to the bottom is allowed to occur. It's not good. Mm-hmm. And so how do we stop that? I hear that on a bunch of shows this morning, yesterday. How can we stop this? He's going to become a symbol of someone who is trying to stop it. And so I think he could turn out to be a resource, a touch point, a reference point for lots of efforts going forward to have this kind of behavior in our culture. That's my hope anyway.
But the organization itself, what do you think are the things, because you and I don't know anything about Turning Point other than what we know about Charlie Kirk, that it has 3,500 chapters and that it has 300 employees. That's all I know. And so I don't know, for example, I know that there is, Charlie Kirk would be the equivalent of the CEO and major spokesperson. I know that there's a number 2 who's the COO, who makes the trains run on time.
Right. And
who organizes all the other people.
So he may be a mechanic, or he may be an inspirational, charismatic figure. We don't know that.
And there may be people on college campuses today or recent graduates who aren't even part of Turning Point.
Well, this is what I said earlier. Who knows what talent is buried in that organization that now has a chance to bloom?
Right.
The way I would interpret your question is if we were on the board of directors of Turning Point, the question becomes, what do we do now?
Right.
What's the future of this organization?
Yes.
What choices do they have? Are they going to try to identify, mini Charlie Kirks that can come to the forefront in their local chapters, in their state, in regional things, maybe nationally, maybe internationally? What is the scope of what they're going to try to do? That's going to be a big challenge for them, and it'll probably be years in the development.
And let me ask you a question. When Charlie Kirk first started, he would get 20 people who'd show up. I was sent an email about a week to 10 days ago showing his fall schedule, and there are probably 25 campuses that he was going to be on.
Right.
When he goes onto a college campus now, the crowds that he draws are somewhere between 10,000 on a small college campus to 25,000 on a larger college campus. So he draws very, very large crowds. I think one of the reasons people come is they're excited by him as a person. And so the question is going to be, can you have multiple stars? I'm not sure you can have multiple stars. I think there still will need to be a
figurehead,
not just a figurehead.
Well, that's the wrong word, but I'm grappling for somebody that personifies in one person the organization.
Yes, and then there's a whole bunch of other people who still are building the organization and building its outreach and building its influence.
If I were on the board, I would want to study other organizations that have had their leaders suddenly lost. Certain ministries. You think of Jimmy Swaggart or Jim Baker or Falwell. They all had kind of those were explicitly religious. This is partly religious, but not explicitly
But
a
most,
church.
I mean, the people that you've given as examples they haven't been assassinated. They were caught up well, but they destroyed their own organization by their personal behavior.
Yeah.
Their personal behavior.
Fair enough. But what do you do when the personification of a group is gone?
Yeah.
If I were on that board, I would want to know what the attendance figures are. Are they going to fall off because people are just not interested in anybody but Charlie? That would be
the question.
a bad omen for where this can go. But it may be if they, and particularly if they promote it, they say we have to keep Charlie's example alive.
Right.
Come to this, and we're going to talk about how we're going to recreate or sustain what he has done.
And what would you do at those events to try to maintain and build momentum, maintain the current momentum, and even build it? And I'm going to give you an idea that I want to bounce off of you, and that is a part of the events should start with a big screen with some of Charlie Kirk's previous interactions, previous speeches, not 30 minutes, but snippets to keep the Charlie Kirk's influence as part of the formula.
Well, his example.
Yes, thank you. That's a better word.
I think the thing I would be inclined to do, this is just seat of the pants reaction, is to call on agency from the people that are involved. Get involved, take a leadership role. We're not going to tell you what to do. We're going to help sustain the example. We're going to keep alive the things that we think best represent Charlie's example,
okay,
for you to act on and to expand on in your own little world, in your church, in your home, in your friends group, in your school, there you could have a blooming, this Bush idea of 1,000 points of light. Instead of 1 point, maybe you get many more.
Yeah,
which conflicts with your idea that you need one person to be the focus of all of this. I don't know the answer. Maybe there's some combination of it. Some one person has some aspect of it, and a lot of it. I just think it needs to expand.
I think star power. But I do think, and Charlie Kirk had star power because he deserved it. What I'm saying is, you don't anoint somebody with star power. I mean, it's kind of like you can't performers, singers. I mean, if I go to a bar and listen to 10 singers that are unknown, and somebody tells me in 5 years one of those 10 is going to be a star, I wouldn't be able to tell you which of the 10 if they're all good. And so
well, the example that occurs to me is Obama. He was a star, and we keep hearing about whether Michelle is going to run, as if she can inherit his star power somehow. It's like royalty, where you have succession in the family. I don't think it works very well, and you can't transfer star power like that.
Well, I don't think you can, but in the case of Michelle Obama, she at least starts being extremely well known.
Sure, that's right.
Whoever replaces Charlie Kirk is not known at all right now. And this is what I am very, very hopeful that the organization survives and in fact grows. And I have, I've been thinking about, can you do it where you have multiple Charlie Kirks? And I'm not sure that works for building the very large audiences at certain events. Now, the groundwork that's being done on these 3,500 high school and college campuses, that's the day-to-day that the 300 employees and the COO make sure that that's ongoing. And I think that they deserve an immense amount of credit, but you don't know who to give credit.
Right.
You don't know who to give credit to.
Right.
You can give it to Charlie Kirk for organizing it.
Right.
And so it's what he did was incredibly meaningful, and this that quote I gave here about what happens when people, and the one you gave about I did nothing when they came for something, I did nothing, and that's going to be the question now, and the question is going to be the filtering process that finds the leaders of the ideas that Charlie Kirk, because he didn't create these ideas. He didn't create them.
He articulated
them and persuaded people that these ideas work well for them and work well for the community and work well for the country?
Let me touch on a theme we haven't identified yet, but to me is embedded in all of this, and that is the size of government. These threats are threats because people are afraid that the other side is going to get power to force me to live in a way I don't want to live. They're going to regulate me, tax me. From the right, this would be the point of view. From the left is they're going to make me, not be who I am. They're going to exile me, those kinds of identity-related threats. And so if you don't have a government with that power, if you have a decentralized or a devolved government where each community, each state settles these things in its own way, and maybe there's 50 different solutions, I think there's brilliance in that. That's the way our government was set up to originally to allow these laboratories, and now we tend to universalize. And we got to have one answer at the federal level for everybody to have. If one person has a right, everyone else has to have that right. I'm thinking of abortion rights. You can't have a different law in the states. That's changed now with the Dobbs decision. Each state gets to decide. And so if you don't like what's going on in your state, you move to a state that has policies you like better. I think that's part of the answer. I think that's part of what Trump is trying to do, is to reduce the size and coercion in the federal government.
Well, that's certainly what Charlie Kirk talked about when he talked about the founding of our country, and the very things you're talking about now is that is how the Constitution envisioned the country, and then there's that quote. I don't remember the lady that asked Ben Franklin, "Well, what have you given us?" Is it Mr. Franklin or Dr. Franklin? Which one was it when they
I don't
asked?
remember what she said.
Well, she said, "What have you given us?" And he said, "I've given you a republic, madam, if you can keep it."
If you can keep it.
If you can keep it.
Yeah.
And what he meant by that was, I've given you a national government that is limited in scope and that is constrained by the Constitution. And then in the 1930s, those constraints started to break. Yeah. And then since then, there are now no constraints. I'll tell you something that's interesting, and we'll be seeing it here very soon, and that is that the House is about to pass the 2026 budget. The fiscal year begins October 1st. If a budget is not passed by October 1st, the government shuts down. The House is about to pass a budget that will show no increase in spending for a year. Does that sound crazy right to you?
You mean to the political right?
Yes.
It sounds very prudent to me.
Okay.
I mean, we lived on that amount last year. It's if there's inflation, maybe it's 2 or 3% less in real terms next year. We have to start learning how to constrain somewhere.
Okay.
That sounds like a great place to start.
All right. So, and the Democrats are furious, and they are demanding, and this is what's interesting, they are demanding that Schumer, because apparently the budget needs to pass with 60 votes. Mm-hmm. They are demanding that Schumer not cave and not let a budget passes that spends as much next year as was spent this year. They're demanding that he not do that.
They're demanding that it be larger.
That it be the Democrats are demanding that spending go up.
Right.
Okay. Now, what's interesting is this. I want to talk about how our government is structured. You have the House that passes any bills that are for spending or taxes or spending have to originate in the House.
Yes.
So let's assume, for purpose of discussion, that a budget passes out of the House that does not increase spending, and now it moves to the Senate, and Republicans in the Senate, more than 50 senators who are Republicans
support the
bill.
But it's not 60. It's not
60. And so now Schumer then demands that spending increase, or he will not provide the votes to pass it. And then if that happens, the government shuts down. What happens then? Under our government, what happens then?
Well, I think there are certain essential services that continue. I think Social Security checks still go out. I think the defense is still spent. Mm-hmm. But a lot of discretionary things, a lot of agencies of government are what do you call it?
Furloughed.
Furloughed. That's the word I'm looking for. Furloughed.
Yeah.
And that will go on until they get an agreement on what to fund.
Mm-hmm. And who gets to determine, who ultimately determines when you get into the marginal aspects. Social Security checks go out. That's by law.
Mm-hmm.
Medicare goes out. That's by law. Medicaid goes out. That's by law. Defense spending goes out. That's by law. Then there's this fuzzy area. And there may be some other things by law that, because I'm not saying that's the whole list.
Right.
But I know that there's a fuzzy area. Who determines what's in the fuzzy area?
I don't know.
The president.
Okay.
Doesn't matter who the president is, the president. And so when Biden was president, Republicans were stuck with, even when they had the majority of the House, they could have not passed a budget that Biden, that wouldn't pass the Senate. But then if the government got shut down, Biden was the one who would then determine who got money.
Mm-hmm.
And for Republicans, they're saying that's even worse than passing a semi-bad budget. And so Schumer is going to be put in the position of either, the way the left will look at it, caving so as not to give Trump
that power.
In other words, Schumer would be making Trump the closest thing to a dictator.
To a king, yeah.
Or a king.
Yeah.
And it would be Schumer and the Democrats who are doing it.
Right.
And it'll be interesting to see how the media tries to describe that, because it's going to pass the House. And there'll be a majority of the Senate, all the Republicans, or almost all,
mm-hmm.
who will pass it, because they're talking now. I mean, it's not like something happens in the House and the John Thune and the leaders and the Republican leaders in the Senate are unaware of what's going on.
Right.
It's the administration, the House, and the Republicans in the Senate who are all working on this bill. And that's the way our system, by the way, is supposed to work. So
yes.
This isn't Ketanji Brown Jackson seems to think that there's all these conspiracies and tricks and things that people are pulling. No, this is the way our system is designed to work, because we're all humans and we all have fallibilities, and so we try to minimize the risk of the fallibilities.
Right.
And by the way, just as a quick aside, as I was driving in, Mark Green was being interviewed. Former Congressman Mark Green was being interviewed.
Congressman in Tennessee.
Yes.
Who left to take a private sector job.
Yes.
He had a pretty important chairmanship in the House, didn't he?
Yes, yeah, very important. And he was a very effective congressman, if you define effective versus other congressmen.
Right.
But what he said was that one of the reasons I left is that the House is so ineffective at getting anything meaningful done. And when he didn't say the House. He said Washington, because that includes everything.
Yeah.
So if you pass something out of the House, that doesn't mean it's done.
Right.
And he said the amount of work to get something passed out of committee and then get it passed out of the House and then see it not passed in the Senate, he said, which was more the norm. That he said it's so hard. And that gets into why our Constitution, that what he said was entirely predictable.
Two things I'll say about that. One is that it's a good reason why government should be small, where that's not so important.
At the national
level. Yeah. If they don't get along, then things just don't happen.
Right.
Second, that's by design,
Yes.
because the founders did not want an efficient way to impose tyranny.
Mm-hmm.
So they made it really hard to impose tyranny.
Mm-hmm.
That's why it's really hard to pass anything. And once things get too big and are on autopilot, and you're trying to get it off autopilot, you can't get everyone to agree how to turn off the autopilot.
And there are no constraints. There's
yes.
nothing that says you must balance the budget.
Right.
So there literally are no constraints on spending. And that is the problem. But anyway, and this is the message, by the way, that you and I, this is the message that Charlie Kirk would talk about on college campus, and he would talk about it from not just a practical but a moral standpoint. And that was why he was such a threat. Well, Mike, this has been a great show, and I appreciate you indulging me on wanting to talk so much about Charlie and trying to predict what's going to happen with his wonderful organization.
Well, maybe a year from now we can revisit this and see what has happened. How does it compare to what we saw through a glass darkly about what might happen?
Yeah. Thanks so much. Appreciate it.